I found this story, and it's kind of amazing. It says that in 2023, the entire planet vibrated for 9 days. And scientists just couldn't get to the bottom of why it was happening. There's this illustration which shows all the seismology sensors around the world going off, as this ripple of vibrations spreads around the planet from north to south. I kind of imagine all the seismologists around the world calling each other, being like, "Are you seeing what I'm seeing?" Because a seismic signal of this type, and for this long, has literally never been seen before. How can a planetary scale event of this magnitude take place without anybody immediately being able to explain why? The first part of the question was pretty easy. Where did it come from? Scientists were looking for clues in the signal itself, which looked like this. The seismic waves were uniform and monochromatic in frequency, which meant they could rule out nuclear weapon tests, which have a very distinct seismic signature. And also, they could rule out earthquakes, which will give off a much more complex signal. Soon, scientists were able to find the approximate source location by triangulating the observed seismic signal to eastern Greenland. There were also signs of a mega tsunami in the area on the 16th of September, and a military base, which had luckily been abandoned days earlier due to bad weather, was all but destroyed. Mega tsunamis, which are not uncommon in Greenland, are often caused by major landslides falling into bodies of water. A famous example is in Lituya Bay, Alaska in 1957, that measured 520 meters and remains the largest tsunami ever recorded. But in this more recent case, scientists determined the likely source to be a 1.2 kilometer high mountain peak, which collapsed into a gully in Greenland's Dixon Fjord. But there were still a lot of things that just didn't add up. It remained unclear how a landslide could produce such a long-lasting reverberation, because all the previous examples of landslide tsunamis in Greenland and Alaska were only detected by very local sensors. They were not seen globally, and only lasted for a matter of hours, not days. So scientists designated the event an unidentified seismic object, or USO. In order to get to the bottom of this mystery, it took 68 scientists from 40 institutions in 15 countries working together to combine seismic data, field measurements, on-the-ground and satellite imagery, and a completely new approach to modelling tsunami waves. So, what happened? Why did the shockwaves from this mega tsunami continue to reverberate around the planet for so long?
Researchers say they've solved the mystery of the origins of the seismic signal that shook the Earth for 9 days last September.
Scientific investigations show that a receding glacier triggered the collapse of the mountaintop, producing a landslide which carried roughly 25 million cubic meters of material into the fjord below. That's about the equivalent of 10 Great Pyramids of Giza tumbling down into the water. This avalanche of rock and ice crashed into the fjord at such an angle that the inlet's steep parallel walls ended up containing much of the landslide's huge energy within the fjord. And it resulted in a 200-meter tsunami wave, which then reduced down to 7 meters within a few minutes. But the enormous energy of this vast body of water rhythmically sloshing from one side to the other continued to send seismic waves across the world as it remained trapped within the inlet. The only way scientists could crack this last piece of the puzzle was by modelling the mega tsunami in a completely new way, because their existing models could only simulate a few hours. As luck would have it, they were able to compare these new long-duration simulations with measurements from the site itself, because sensors measuring water depth just so happened to have been set up by scientists in the fjord 2 weeks before the landslide. As a result, the tsunami model was able to predict the wave's behaviour in a way that exactly matched the original seismic signals.
Remote as it is, this is a location that cruise ships do visit. Fortunately, no vessels were in the area when the landslide happened, but scientists say the risk of these events is increasing with climate change.
Now that scientists have found the answer to this mystery, and the dust has settled on this planetary-scale seismic event, scientists are asking, what if this happens again, but near a populated area? Because the scientific investigation shows that the giant landslide was triggered by a receding glacier. And such events are becoming more common, as global heating continues to lead to thawing permafrosts, often described as the glue that holds mountains together. and to glaciers melting more rapidly.
A Swiss village was buried after a glacier collapsed in the Alps. The massive chunk of glacier carrying rock and debris detached and came tumbling down the mountainside, destroying everything in its path.